You're listening to the Jersey Guys Podcast, the show that talks about hard rock, heavy metal, AOR, and West Coast music. In-depth conversation and special guests are always on tap, so settle in and turn it up. Now, here are your hosts, Tom and Mark.
Hey everybody, this is Mark from the Jersey Guys Podcast. I'm here with Tom Coyne, my co-host, and today we've got special guest Dave Starr from Vicious Rumors. Welcome, Dave. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you, Dave.
Thanks.
I wanted to start from the beginning like I usually do with the guests that we have on, and if you could tell us a little bit about how the band started and how you arrived on the name of the band.
The naming of the band, to be honest with you, because Jeff had a couple of different lineups together. Jeff Thorpe, the founding member of the band, had a couple of different lineups before things got solidified. And to be honest with you, I don't really know how he came upon the band name, or I don't remember. He probably told me years ago. I just don't remember I do remember this. I remember when I heard the band name Vicious Rumors, I didn't think it was a cool name. I like the way it got shortened to VR, but Vicious Rumors kind of to me sounded like a new wave or a punk rock name. For whatever reason, it just didn't really grab me, but the band is kind of became known as VR for short, and I always liked VR better than Vicious Rumors. But the early days of the band were I was playing in Law's Rocket at the time. This is 82, 83. And I saw Jeff playing a great club in San Francisco called the Old Waldorf. This was one of his earlier versions of VR before we did any of the albums. And I was pretty impressed by what I saw. They had some killer tunes, and I wish there was video footage of this, but it looks like they never got videotaped. Jeff used to be brought up out on stage in a coffin and carried by these monks. And it was the most bizarre thing. And he'd bust out of the coffin. There was dry ice all over the place. And it just shit would hit the fan, man. It was crazy. And I thought, wow, these dudes are insane. So I ended up introducing myself to Jeff and just struck up a friendship. And to make a long story short, he went through some different lineup changes and people were in and out of the band. And it just... we stayed in touch, and I think sometime in 84, he called me up and he said that he was putting a new lineup together. And I went up and auditioned and ended up joining the band in late 84. And at that point, it was Jeff and Gary St. Pierre on vocals and me on bass. And then we had a drummer whose name escapes me, played a couple of minor shows up in Northern California, and then shortly thereafter we got Larry Howe in the band on drums after I'd been in the band about 6 months. So that was kind of the foundation of what would become the first album. So that would be 85 when the four of us were playing together before Vinnie Moore ended up coming out.
And how did you get hooked up with Vinnie Moore?
Well, Jeff had a tentative handshake deal with Mike Varney and Shrapnel Records to do his standard album deal. Back then was 2 albums, and we needed another guitar player. The songs were basically written for 2 guitars, and we needed to get a second guitar player. And Mike at the time was doing the Mike Varney Spotlight in Guitar Player magazine, where people would submit cassette tapes of their playing, and Mike would review and give them promotion in his Spotlight column in Guitar Player magazine. So he got a tape from Vinnie Moore, and he was really impressed with it. And he told Jeff, he said, "Hey, I got this cat out in Delaware, Vinnie Moore, and I think this could be a good matchup here." So basically, Mike flew Vinnie out to do the record with us, and that was in, I believe, the summer of '85. things didn't. That's basically how it happened. Things kind of went sour from there. Vinny was not really thrilled with the situation, and he actually told Mike Varney he wanted to bail out on us. And Mike said, "No, you're going to stay put. And you're going to finish the record, and then you can go back home to Delaware." So unbeknownst to us, while we were recording the album with Vinny was really upset. He was away from home really for the first time. I think he was 18 or 19 at the time. He was homesick, and he didn't really like what was going on. He didn't like some of the material. I think he didn't really care for Gary's vocals, and I think he really wanted to be in a one guitar band. He didn't really like sharing guitar duties with Jeff. So there was some underlying friction that we didn't really know about. But when we did the photo session for the Soldiers of the Night album, Vinny said, I'm going to fly home to Delaware and take care of some business, and then I'll get on the first plane back out here. And we never saw the guy again.
I kind of saw that one coming as you were telling me the story.
Yeah. And he kept it. I remember talking to him on the phone, and he would keeping this lie up to me for reasons I don't really know. He kept saying, like, "Oh yeah, I got some things I got to take care of here, but it'll probably be in the next couple of weeks." And then it was the next couple of months. And finally he said, "I'm not coming back. I don't want to come back out there." I wasn't happy with the situation. So I think there was some bad feelings on our part towards him because of the way that he handled it. And obviously, when you got your debut album coming out, the last thing you want to do is start losing band members. But the bottom line is he was kind of never really in the band. He did the record with us, but he quit before the record even came out. So that was the situation with Vinny. So it was, I think there were some bad feelings for a while, but it's all, as they say, water under the bridge now. I think his presence on the album, I think he did a great job on the album, whether he wants to admit it or not. And I think the album helped him, and I think it helped us because there was such a tremendous young talent in Vinny's presence on the record. So I think it was beneficial to both sides, even though, like I said a few minutes ago, that it was an unfortunate situation where you got somebody who comes in and then basically quits behind your back before the record even comes out. So, but it is what it is. And that is what I call a standalone album, because that's the only album we did with Vinny and the only album that we did with Gary St. Pierre singing. Right. It's a good record. I think we ended up doing better as we moved forward, but I think the record stands the test of time, and I think it's a pretty good, damn good record.
It is a good record. Personally, I felt the band really didn't have its signature sound yet, because what was going to make the signature sound wasn't in the band yet. So for what it was, mid-'80s power metal, street metal, whatever the terms were back then that it was called, it was a good record. And it definitely did help both parties, because a lot of people used to, I remember back in the day when the record came out, a lot of people used to say, oh, when Vinnie Moore's Mind's Eye record came out, it got a lot of attention. And it was a very common thing to say, well, he's also in a band called Vicious Rumors. And I used to tell people, well, he's really not in that band anymore. They have a new lineup. And I think it helped you guys too, that he had become kind of like one of those Tony McAlpine, Satriani guitar heroes. And his name was synonymous with Vicious Rumors.
Yeah, I think that really rubbed him the wrong way when Mind's Eye came out, because when people were doing press for him, they would ask him about the VR album, right, Soldiers of the Night, and he didn't even want to talk about it. And I remember there was it was an interview with him in Guitar Player or Guitar World where he said the Soldiers of the Night album, he didn't really want to talk about it. And I just remember this one line. It said he called it tasteless in a lot of ways. And I think he's mellowed out since then, because I talk to him all the time on Facebook. And, I saw him at the NAMM show a couple of years later after, I think when we got signed to Atlantic in 1990, we hooked up with him. That was the first time we saw him in 1990. So it's all, it's just one of those things, but everything's cool. It was a little testy there maybe for a few years, but it's all okay.
Well, he's carved out a nice career for himself with UFO. I mean, next to Schenker, he's now the most identifiable guitar player they ever had. So
he's had a great career, and whether he likes it or not, it all started with VR.
That's right.
So now I wanted to take you to the beginnings of what turned out to be the vintage period of the band. How did you guys get hooked up with Carl Albert? I know he had been in a lot of bands prior, Ruffians, Villain, a band called Scratch. How did you first hear of him, and how did you recruit him?
Well, the situation with we hired a guitar player named Terry Montana, who was a friend of everybody's in the band, and he was a good guitar player, but it just wasn't really working out. He did all the Soldiers, if you want to call them tour dates, although all we did was play around Northern California. And it just wasn't really working out. And Gary was not working out. He had a lot of problems. Let's just leave it at that. And he was kind of checked out mentally. The band was just kind of dead in the water, and we needed to do something. And basically nothing was getting done. And I took the bull by the horns, basically, and made the decision to get a new singer. I told Jeff, I said, which is kind of a little odd, because Jeff was the founding member of the band, and you would think that everything would go through him or he would make the decisions. But I just said, Jeff, I'm going to deal with this. Carl, I don't remember, somebody referred me to, you got to check out this guy, Carl Albert. I don't remember who it was, but I saw him play at this little club in San Francisco called Mbuhe Gardens. I went to go scope him out, and I was blown away. This was when he was in Villain, and the Villain EP had just come out, and the band was good, but Carl stood out as just a real diamond in the rough. The band was cool. I can't say anything bad about the band, but I saw this amazing singer that I just felt like I needed to grab this guy and do whatever it took to get him into VR. And I flagged him down after the show and introduced myself. And he, we laughed about this later, but he kind of thought I was a real weirdo pestering him. And I said, look, I'm just going to give you my phone number. I play bass in VR. We've got this record deal. I'd really like to talk to you about doing some stuff together. And he was just blowing me off, and I thought I would never hear from the guy again. But I guess he gave me his phone number, because I remember calling him, and I said, look, just give me your address. I'll send you a promo package. I'll send you the Soldiers album and a bunch of press from Europe. And if you like the stuff, fine. If you don't, hell, throw the shit away, man, whatever. But just give me this chance to. And so he gave me his address, and I sent him a promo package. And a couple of weeks go by, and he called me up, and he said, just out of the blue, he goes, I want to join the band. I didn't know what was going on with Villain, and maybe he wasn't happy with the situation, or he just realized this was a step up, a major step up. But he came down. I don't really know if you'd want to call it an audition, because we didn't audition any other singers. Basically he came down and did a bunch of the Soldiers of the Night material. And we were sold. And that's how the whole thing happened with Carl. And actually backing up slightly, maybe a month or so, is when we realized that Terry Montana wasn't going to work out. I was friends with Mark McGee, and we were both from the same town, Alameda, California. And he'd played in some metal bands, hard rock bands. And I knew him, and I thought he was a really good guitar player and a really nice guy. And I remember striking up a conversation with him one day saying, it looks like the situation with Terry isn't working out. Would you be interested? And he came down and played with us, and it was just magic. And he was really young then. He was probably only, maybe 18 or 19, but he was way beyond his years in terms of talent and ability. And he had flashes of that kind of Vinnie Moore, neoclassical virtuosity, as well as just, Mark's, I'll flat out say this, he's the best musician I've ever played with. He knows like every song ever written by everybody. He's got the most amazing catalog up in his brain of every riff and every lick, and he's just a really well-rounded writer and guitar player. And the weird thing about Mark joining the band was, technically when he came down and joined, Gary was still in the band. And he came down and he sang and he played at rehearsal while we still had Gary in the band. And Mark, I remember taking me aside going, are you telling me you're really going to get rid of Gary? Because I don't really think this is going to work out for me. And I told him, I said, look, just hang tight. I got this guy, Carl Albert, I'm dealing with, and I think I'm going to make this work somehow. And it was kind of an awkward situation because we knew that Gary was on his way out as well, but we kept our mouths shut, obviously, about it until we had all of our ducks in a row. So Mark joined, and technically he was in the band with Gary for a couple of weeks. And then Carl came down and solidified the new lineup. And I told Jeff, I said, you go way back with Gary, so why don't you take care of Gary and I'll go take care of Terry. And those guys got their walking papers, and the classic lineup was basically born. And that was sometime in early 86, probably. Early 86.
So the guillotine was dropped on two members, and Enter McGee and Carl Albert.
Yeah, and I felt really bad about Terry because I remember I rode my motorcycle over to his house and I said, hey, I got to sit down and talk about something. I left there in tears. I felt like crap. Terry was a really good guy. I'm still friends with him. It just wasn't working out for a multitude of reasons. And Mike Varney said to me, I remember he said, how are things going with Terry? And I said, oh, they're going okay. And he said, Mike Varney said, I'm telling you, Dave, if you guys don't give me demos that blow me away, as you did with the Soldiers of the Night material, he said, I'm not putting out a second album for you guys. I'm going to drop you. It was a difficult situation.
So you're back against the wall to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, the threat from Mike Varney, and I should maybe use the word threat, maybe coercion or friendly advice from the record company.
Or it's a business.
Yeah, and he just said, look, I know Terry, I know what he's capable of, but if you guys don't blow me away with demos for the new material, I'm not going to do another record with you. So that's, when you hear that from the head of the record label, that's pretty scary. It's like, what do we do here? So we had I think the situation with Terry was harder to deal with than Gary, because Gary had a lot of problems at that time that were, I don't want to really bag on the guy, but they were just impeding his ability to function.
Right.
So I'll just leave it at that. And Gary had done one of the U.S. metal tracks with Jeff on those compilation albums that came out a few years. I think that was in '84. He did a track called Ultimate Death. Oh, wait a minute. No, that wasn't Ultimate Death. I think it was One Way Ticket was the track. Ultimate Death was the previous lineup of the guys who I told you that I saw at the old Waldorf. So on the compilation albums, there was a song called Ultimate Death on US Metal 3, I think. It came out in '83. And then in '84, there was US Metal 4 compilation. And I think the track was called One Way Ticket. And Gary sang on that. So we didn't actually do any recording with Gary, with Terry Montana on guitar. So I think it was a little tougher for Jeff to say goodbye to Gary because there was at least some recording that had been done, and plus the Soldiers of the Night album. So
right.
It was just a difficult situation all around. But I think I made the right call by bringing Carl and Mark in, and I think the results speak for themselves on the next couple of records.
Yeah, the results definitely do speak for themselves. You actually, in my opinion, you secured one of the top 4 or 5 singers of that generation in Carl. Mark McGee, what could you say? This is a guy that landed the Greg Allman gig. So, I mean, that kind of speaks volumes right there. If you take us a little bit through the recording of that album, some of my all-time favorite Vicious Rumors songs are on that album. So, if you could just take us through how that went.
On the Digital Dictator album?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we recorded that the summer of, when was it? 87, I think, summer of 87. And, there was a lot of energy. Carl and Mark brought, a new level of energy into the band. And we started writing a bunch of new material. I had some songs and Mark had some ideas. And it was a pretty exciting time for the band, for all 5 of us. And we recorded that at Prairie Sun Studios up in Cotati, California, which is where Mike did most of his shrapnel recordings. A lot of people don't know we had really, really tight time constraints on those Shrapnel records, which might shock the hell probably out of some people. Mike had pretty much a strict 100-hour budget for recording time. That's for everything. And I think we did, on Soldiers of the Night, I think we did 108. We went over 8 hours. And on Digital Dictator, I think it was 116 hours. So that's a pretty bam. You gotta get in there. When you were doing records for Mike Varney, you had to know what you were doing when you went in there. You couldn't go in there and waste time and experiment. You basically had to get in there with your shit together and perform flawlessly to get everything done, get 10 tracks done in 100 hours. Because that's not a lot of time to do a record.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But
wow.
we did them. I think it was actually kind of good because I think a lot of bands go into the studio and they're just not really prepared and they waste time and they waste money. You didn't have the luxury of doing that when you were recording for Shrapnel Records. You had to go in there prepared and have your shit together, which we did. And I think the records sound pretty good. Obviously, I think the stuff on Atlantic sounds a little bit better studio, more money, better production values. But I think the Shrapnel records stand out. And all these years later, 35 years or so, they still stand the test of time. And I've got people who tell me they still listen to that stuff to this day. But there was definitely a strong vibe in the studio. Whether or not it's funny when you look back on, you do these records and you look back on them over the passage of time, and we weren't really thinking we were doing anything magical. We were just 5 guys in the studio trying to make some rock and roll. And you don't think beyond next week or next month, but it just blows my mind that people here in 2022 say they still listen to those records to this day.
Well, you're talking to one of them.
Yeah, and that they mean something to them. Where I'm the same way with it. I'm the same way when I'm listening to Judas Priest or Thin Lizzy or Blue Oyster Cult or Kiss or any of the other stuff that influenced me as a musician. And I'll listen to an old Judas Priest track and I'll go, God, that reminds me of 1980, doing this and that. And I'll listen to Blue Oyster Cult and it'll remind me of something. And people will say like, oh, when I listen to Digital Dictator, it takes me back to this special time in my life. And it's really mind blowing to hear people say stuff like that and to say that they still listen to the stuff, some on a daily basis. It's really rewarding to hear people to know that you made some music that really made an impact on people's lives.
Well, I know for myself personally, and I'm old enough. You mentioned Blue Oyster Cult. I bought their first record when it came out, so that's how old I am. Mark's a lot younger than me, but
I'm 60 now. So
I just turned 63. Mark is 51.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's a bit younger than we are. I had such an attachment to Vicious Rumors and a few other bands. Oddly enough, we're all California bands for the most part. Lizzie Borden, Leatherwolf, Vicious Rumors, those bands I thought kind of stood out a little bit ahead and shoulders of everybody else, especially a lot of the East Coast bands. But when I got turned on to you guys, when Carl and McGee had come on board, I had a tremendous attachment to the songs, the energy, the gang vocals. You guys had such a unique sound and still do. Like that original band or the classic lineup, I don't think there's ever been a band that has really replicated that sound. And that's very unique. And I think that's why to this day, having networked with a lot of fans over the years, people have such an attachment to the unique sound of the band and, of course, Carl's vocals.
Yeah, Carl was kind of like my favorite singer probably of all time was in terms of the metal singers. And when I say metal singers, like Bruce Dickinson, Rob Halford, Jeff Tate, those kind of guys. Carl was the closest to what I felt was that kind of realm. And so Judas Priest was sort of my ultimate band. And I thought that Carl kind of at a cross between maybe Dio and Rob Halford.
Yeah, that's what I always thought too. A little bit of the guy in Man of War too, Eric Adams, on some songs.
And on the guitar front, I love the interplay between KK and Glenn. And I thought, God, because Mark has such a vast, different background than Jeff does. Jeff was really into the Hendrix and Sabbath and some of the super heavy, crazy shit, with the vibrato bar. And Mark came from almost a more progressive background, where he was influenced by Kiss, but he got into Yes and Heart, and he just had kind of a more well-rounded catalog of influences. And that was great because it made a difference it's like the worst thing you want to do is go see a band and both guitar players sound exactly the same, playing all this mindless arpeggios and sweeps and shit that I just puts you to sleep. And you hear Glenn and KK, a serious fan knows the difference between each guitar player. And you listen to VR and I can go, that's Mark and that's Jeff. You can tell them apart, but yet they come together to create this great energy. And I've said this a million times and I'll say it again. I'm really proud for bringing Carl and Mark into the band because it really made VR what it was.
Undoubtedly, because it was an era where you could get very much mixed up with a lot of there were so many bands at that time. It was such a rich era of talent. But I really feel Carl's vocals set you guys kind of apart. And you did have a signature sound. And at least on the second album that you were developing, at least in my opinion, became your signature sound. And I think it was even more accentuated on the next album when you went to the major label. So if you could tell us about that a little bit.
It was interesting because when we finished the 2-album deal, I think after we got signed to Shrapnel, shortly thereafter, Mike changed everything to a 4-album deal for all the bands that got signed after us. So we kind of escaped that, not being negative towards Mike, but I think it was beneficial for us not to be held back to a smaller label because it gave us the opportunity to get signed to a big label, which is what ended up happening. So the way the thing with Atlantic came about was, and I played a major part in this as well, I booked the band to play with Paul Stanley when I found out that Paul Stanley was doing this club solo tour in '89. And the local club, the big venue in the Bay Area, was called the Omni in Oakland. We played there all the time. And I went, and when I found out that Paul was doing this club tour, I called up the booking agent there and I said, I got to get on the show with Paul Stanley. And basically I twisted their arm. I think I the right place at the right time. I called probably before every other band did. And make a long story short, I got us on the bill, support act. I think there was maybe one band in front of us, and then it was VR, then Paul Stanley. And unbeknownst to us, I just wanted to play the show because I was a big Kiss fan and I wanted to meet Paul Stanley, which I did meet, and he was a great guy. He was so nice, hanging out with him backstage in the dressing room. I was like literally shaking in my boots. And unbeknownst to us, there was a guy named Bob Zemsky who was in the crowd who co-managed Sabotage, and Sabotage was on Atlantic. And Bob Zemsky was best friends with Jason Flom, who was running the metal department at Atlantic Records. So Bob saw us and was blown away and called Jason Flom back in New York and said, hey, I just saw this great band out here in California called Vicious Rumors, and I think you guys should sign them. So that's how we ended up getting signed to Atlantic Records, courtesy of Bob Zemsky seeing us play with Paul Stanley at the Omni in Oakland in 1989. And he called Jason Flom at Atlantic, said, hey, there's this hot band. You guys got to get on it. So that's how the deal with Atlantic ended up coming about, which was very fortunate for us because we just weren't getting a lot of bites. I think at the time, Elliot Kahn and Jeff Salzman, who were managing Testament, were helping us out and shopping our demo tapes, and we were just getting turned down by everybody until this thing with Atlantic came about. It basically saved us because I don't know what we were going to do if the Atlantic deal didn't come around. And so they wanted us for 10 albums. They wanted to sign us to a 10-album long-term deal. Elliot Kahn and Jeff Salzman negotiated the record deal, and we got it down to 7. And we lasted 3 albums on the label, but it is what it is. But yeah, the Atlantic thing opened up a lot of doors for us. Got us on MTV, got us in print ads in all the major magazines, got us to tour Europe and the U.S. and Japan. And so it opened up a lot of doors. It didn't go gangbusters like we were hoping for. The late Malcolm Dome, who just passed away last year, did a promotional sticker for that first Atlantic record, said the metal album that will define the 90s. and Malcolm Dome carried a lot of weight, but things were starting to change in the music business right around that time. A lot of people look back on it and say, if you guys would have got signed to Atlantic in 86 or 87 or 85 or something, it could have been a world of difference. But, it is what it is. But it opened up a lot of doors for us at the time. And of course, when you get signed to a major label deal, we're all on cloud 9. We're all thinking, we're going to get huge. We're going to be the next Judas Priest, blah, blah, blah. But Atlantic didn't really sink a lot of money into us, and we couldn't get any, at least in the U.S., we couldn't get any support slots on any big tours. And we just ended up doing headlining club tours in the U.S. with minimum promotion from Atlantic. And, we did a lot of shows. We were playing to, 100, 150 people, 50 people some nights. It was a tough road. But when we went to Europe, we were playing huge venues with this was a support act for Death Angel in 1990, and we were playing to 500, 1,000, 1,500 people every night. It was crazy. It's like night and day.
Well, the scene back then in the States was very regional. I remember myself, I used to go to the L'Amour's, which was in Brooklyn, 10, 15 minutes from where I grew up. But I used to also venture into the city to the Cat Club, which used to put on a lot of the West Coast bands when they were in the area would play there. And you'd go to L'Amour's and see maybe like a local band that wasn't even signed that would pack the place. You go to the Cat Club, see you guys. I saw a Leather Wolf there. I saw Lizzie Borden. Club would be half empty because a lot of the East Coast people just really weren't in tune with the West Coast bands, at least as much as I was for that matter. So it was, I found the States at that time, things were very regional, where then you'd see bands like yourself, you go out of the country or even to Japan and get like a hero's welcome.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough touring in the U.S. We did 3 U.S. tours, 90, 91, and 93, and they were all a real tough grind. A lot of the shows were not real well attended. A lot of people just, didn't know we were out there because it takes a lot of money and a lot of resources to break a band in the U.S. Because the country is so huge. And like you said, it's regional, and I think people are finicky. And whereas in Europe, it's practically a religion.
Yes.
And they got people going to shows every night, traveling all around the continent. And I think in the U.S., people are a little more, blasé about everything. They're folding their arms and saying, well, who are these guys? Why should I go see them? It's hard. It's very hard to generate a buzz in a country of 330 million people that's 3,000 miles across,
right,
from coast to coast.
I saw so many shows in the 80s, 70s, and I've talked about it with Mark also. 3 of the best shows I ever saw were at the Cat Club, one of which was your band, Lizzie Borden and Leather Wolf. And I remember all 3 shows, club was probably half empty, And then you'd see these other bands that were more New York, Jersey, Philly area, and they drew really well. The other thing I wanted to point out, too, see if you agree with me, or you may totally disagree with me, but I always felt is just by trying to turn people onto the band back in the day. I think your sound was so unique that when I used to try to push it on some of my friends, they thought it was too heavy. They say, oh yeah, the singer's really good. It's a little too heavy. And it was probably, the singer was so good, it wouldn't attract the guys that were into the real heavy thrash type of stuff because that vocal is not prevalent in that. So it had like a tremendous amount of balls and speed at times, but you also had this singer that kind of fit more in that traditional classic 80s metal vein. So I think it really took a lot of listening for somebody to really digest everything that was going on in the band.
Well, it was real fashionable at the time. Thrash was real fashionable at that time.
Yes.
We were never a thrash band.
Right.
We played heavy stuff, but so did Judas Priest, and we had songs that were like, in the vein of, Painkiller, but with real singing and harmony guitars. And so a lot of people kind of, I think maybe at that time thought that was becoming passé, but we didn't want to jump on any bandwagons. We wanted to play the music that we wanted to play, which was in that vein of Priest, Queensryche, Maiden, Dio, whatever. Those are the ones that come to mind. And we just felt like, hey, if it works, fine. But we're not going to jump on the thrash bandwagon and be something that we're not really to have our heart in.
Right. And it would have prostituted Carl's vocals, too. I mean, you really want to accentuate that guy for what he was instead of trying to sound like a 2-bit thrash band just to fit in.
Yeah.
But I mean, you take that last record that we were just talking about, and you could have the speed and heaviness of Hellraiser, and then a song like Ship of Fools, which is really like a very melodic hard rock song. Like, two different, I always tell people you had to listen to these guys to really absorb everything that was going on. You can't give it like a cursory quick listen to 2 or 3 songs and say, it's too heavy, or it's too this. You really had to listen to the whole album and to absorb all the different plateaus and different tones of the songs.
It was really well constructed, thought out music that, oh God, maybe it went over some people's heads. I don't know.
No, I've always maintained that. That's what I said a few minutes ago. I really felt with my own personal friends. I hung out in the record store that my friend owned back in the day. That was a very popular record store. And I knew it was a tough sell with some of my friends. They thought it was too heavy. They would say to me, the singer's really good. It's really heavy, though.
Well, look at a band like Savatage. I mean, here was another band, and you talked about, and I've always thought with Savatage, it's like kind of a light and dark thing, right? You get the songs that are a little more melodic, a little more, maybe, I don't want to say mellow, but then you have the real heavy, crunchy stuff too. Yeah. So it's like that's what I kind of compare Vicious Rumors to in my mind, in their sound.
It was cool. We did a tour with them in Europe in '91. They were doing the Streets album and we were doing Welcome to the Ball, and it was an amazing double bill. That was just such a great time. We were in Europe for, I don't know, probably a month together. And it was just sold out every night. And the fans were just blown away. They were saying, this is the best combination of 2 bands we could ever hope for. It was almost like a co-headline.
Well, it really was, because that was, in my opinion, the pinnacle of both bands. I think both bands after that started to fray a little bit in terms of direction and whatnot. But if you look at it, 91 was probably the ultimate pinnacle of Savatage and Vicious Rumors.
Unfortunately, shortly after that, we had people dying and people getting fired and people quitting, and nothing good lasts forever.
With that, we go into the next album, Welcome to the Ball. If you could tell us a little bit about the making of that.
Well, the Atlantic debut, which was just called Vicious Rumors, Welcome to the Ball, were both recorded at Fantasy Studios in Berkeley, California, with Michael Rosen producing, and more money. Bigger budget, better studio. Of course, we didn't have a lot of money from Atlantic Records, but the little money that we had was a lot more money than what we had on Shrapnel. Plus, it was a better recording studio, so the albums definitely sound better. I don't listen to the music I've made. I don't listen to stuff I've recorded very often, but every now and then I'll listen back to those first 2 Atlantic records, and I'll go, damn, these records sound pretty good. And they stand the test of time, and they still sound crystal clear.
Yeah, they've dated really well. Incredibly.
It was definitely a big step up in production going from the Shrapnel to Atlantic. I mean, I don't know what it is. Some of that Shrapnel stuff sounds a little gritty.
Gritty and a little tinny in spots. It lacked, your bass runs you could hear, but they weren't fat. The Atlantic stuff, you and Hal had a much bigger, fatter bottom end, which I personally like.
It a lot clearer. The production just sounded a lot cleaner.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool. And like I said, we were on, doing those records, those first two Atlantic records, we were really on cloud nine. Recording the Welcome to the Ball album was, it was a really special time, that those two records, being on Atlantic was such a rush. Although I think by the time Welcome to the Ball came out, we started seeing some cracks starting to appear that, because we did the US, we already had one Atlantic record under our belt, and we realized that things were not going as well as we had dreamed and hoped that they would be. We got signed to Atlantic, and we became a small fish in a giant pond or a giant sea. Atlantic at the time had Phil Collins, Rush, and heavier bands like Skid Row was doing really well with those first couple of albums. So, it was kind of the trickle down thing. But, we kind of made a pact that, hey, we may not last forever. They signed us to a 7-album deal, but we may not last 7 albums. But let's just put our heart and soul into it, because we're here and we play every show like we're playing to 10,000 people, even though we may only be paying to 20 or 50. So we just, we acted like this is our last stand. I think the Welcome to the Ball album turned out really good. I think it was a slight step up from the previous one. Some killer songs on it. One of the things that kind of took place when we got signed to Atlantic is what I look back at and I regret on a little bit, is that I kind of got pushed out of the songwriting part of the band. I co-wrote songs on the first 2 albums, and then when Mark and Carl came on board and things started with Atlantic, they kind of became the Tipton, Downing, Halford 3-piece songwriting team. Carl Albert, Jeff Thorpe, and Mark McGee, and I kind of got pushed to the side. So kind of frustrated me a little bit. So I didn't really write anything on those 2 albums, but I still think overall the albums were really good. I was submitting songs, but they were getting rejected, and riffs and ideas, and they just were never getting incorporated, and I got really frustrated. But I still think overall I hung on to a lot of my songwriting ideas and ended up using them in the future with WildeStarr. And people tell me how great the songs are, and I'll say, well, you know what? The story of that riff.
Right, I've been sitting on it for 30 years.
Yeah, that apparently they weren't good enough for VR, but it's okay. Maybe I should have pushed harder to get my ideas across. But on the Welcome to the Ball, one of my favorite songs is Save You from Anger, Raise Your Hands, You Only Live Twice, Strange Behavior is killer.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty solid. Our only mistake, I think, on that record was doing because on the first Atlantic we did Don't Wait for Me, which was a slam and kick-ass high-tempo energy song for the Headbangers Ball for the MTV video, which people really loved. But then for Welcome to the Ball, I think we made a mistake doing the song Children, even though it's a great song.
It's a great song.
It's a great song, and it's a really powerful lyrical message about children being the inheritors of the world that you leave them. But I think it kind of maybe put it would have been better as a second video, let's say that, or a third video. But I think we should have done a more up-tempo slam and song, and I think that video ended up hurting us more than helping us, because people thought like, well, this is kind of like a lighter sounding tune, which it was. But in hindsight, I think it was a mistake to release that as a video track. But, what's done is done.
So that led into the next album, which was Word of Mouth. Now, at that point, did you leave in between the recordings of those albums?
Well, actually, the next album was the Live in Tokyo.
The Live in Tokyo, right? Right. That's Plug In and Hang On.
Yeah, which was recorded at the end of the Welcome to the Ball tour. Atlantic sent us to Japan for a week, and we did shows in Tokyo and Osaka, and that's probably my least favorite album. We did 2 nights sold out in Tokyo, and they recorded the second night, but we played better on the first night, and they did very little overdubs or fixes. It's really a live album.
Yeah, it is, which is fine. I actually like that sometimes.
it was a great week that we spent in Japan, and then we came back and we were starting to write material for the next studio album, and then we did one more. Ended up getting dropped from Atlantic, which we kind of all knew was going to happen. We weren't selling enough records. They were losing money on us, poor promotion, and also the whole grunge thing started taking off. So the handwriting was kind of on the wall. It was those things. It was grunge. It was lack of promotion and lack of record sales. We were starting over from scratch. And in 93, we did one more. We started doing demos in 92, and we did one more U.S. tour in 93, which is the last tour that I did. It was the last tour the five of us did. I think it was the summer of 93. And I was really excited about the record. There was some really good songs, and I wrote a song with Jeff called My Machine. I wrote all the guitar parts for it, and Jeff wrote the lyrics, and we were both really excited about the song. And we were doing shows around the Bay Area, demoing some of the new material from the Welcome to the Ball album. We played them on the U.S. tour dates. People were loving the tracks. Along the same time, I was going through some personal hell with my marriage to my wife at the time, who was having a lot of substance abuse problems, and it was just screwing up my marriage and screwing up my life. And I was going through some really, really tough times. And Jeff was really concerned about it. And he basically said, I need you to come down to the studio and talk to the guys and explain to everybody what's going on. So I explained to him what's going on, and I told him I really needed the support of the band, and that the band was one of the things that was keeping me alive, keeping me going, because my marriage was falling apart. And they all gave me a vote of confidence, said, we're going to do whatever we can to help you out and get through this. So I was basically in tears, and I thanked everybody in the band. And I said, you guys are, my extended family. And 2 weeks later, they fired me from the band.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And that's how it happened. I think it was on Jeff's birthday in 1993. It's very easy for me to remember Jeff's birthday because it was a day him and Mark walked into the guitar repair shop that I worked at, and told me I was out of the band. I was just devastated.
That's very interesting. I obviously didn't know that, and what's odd about that is the record itself that came after you had left. I as a fan found it to be a very spotty record. I thought it was the beginning of the band losing its sound. I don't know whether it was attributed to that classic lineup not being together anymore, the change of the times. There were elements of alternative grunge in some of the songs. There were elements of what I heard Metallica and Anthrax, two bands I'm not a personal fan of. There were a couple of good songs on it. I liked the song The Voice a lot. But I just felt on that album, even though Carl sang really well, what I loved about the three albums before it seemed to be quickly dissipating.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I've never heard the record. I've never heard anything the band did after I left. But I know some of the songs. I remember there was a really good song called Building Number 6.
Yes.
Thinking of You. Building Number 6 was an interesting tune. That was a song that Jeff wrote about a documentary about a mental institution in, oh God, what was the name of that place? It was an expose that Geraldo Rivera did.
Willowbrook.
Willowbrook, yes. And they even mentioned Willowbrook in the song. And I thought that was an amazing tune. And then when the internet came about years later, I actually looked up the Geraldo Rivera thing. I found it on YouTube, and I go, fuck, man, this is crazy. So I really like that song a lot, but I did the demos for the album. There's some demos floating around, I think, on the internet where you'll find the stuff with me playing bass, where we recorded the demos at Neil Sean's studio in Oakland, California, sometime in 93. So that's as far as I got with the record. But I was definitely, Jeff tells everybody that I wasn't into it. Jeff makes up stories to make himself look like less of a schmuck. That's the way I look at it. But it was basically I got screwed over, and I think Jeff was just going through some kind of inner turmoil where he was really bitter about getting dropped from Atlantic. He was generally unhappy, and And he used me basically as a scapegoat, like it was my fault. And to this day, he just tells everybody that I was losing interest in the band and this and that. None of that was true.
Well, it was, as far as I was concerned, it was the beginning of the end on many fronts. Certainly, we all know what happened to Carl. That was not too far down the pike. And then his resurfacing of the band with the new singer and the new lineup was, I thought, was atrocious. I mean, there was a period of time he sang, which was god awful.
If you look at it like this, okay, if I died in a car accident in 1993 and the band went on without me, I would say that would have probably turned out cool. But the fact is, I got fired from the band for no reason. And then a little over a year later, Carl was dead and Mark quit right about the same time. So you lose 3 guys out of the 5 members from the classic lineup. How do you expect it to go on from there?
It's a sham. I mean, that's
and
how you...
And now I've never listened to any of the records that Jeff's done since I left the band, except for the Warball CD that I came back to do in 2006. That's a whole other story. But I've never read any reviews that have said, gee, the band is better without Dave, Carl, and Mark.
No.
The band is actually better than the classic lineup. The best I've ever heard was that people say the records are good, but they're nothing compared to what the classic lineup did.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, personally, I've thought they've consistently lacked songwriting. They've lacked frontmen. Like I said, there was a period of time he sang. I've seen numerous videos on YouTube with different lineups. There's one lineup he had at one time where the guys in the band looked like they were his son's age. I just been very unaccepting of it. And I'm the type of guy, ever since I was a kid and I got into this music, there are certain guys in bands you could replace. There are certain guys in bands you can't replace. And if you choose to continue on with that band without that guy, well, it's on you. You may be making money off of that name, but me as a fan am entitled to have my opinion of it. And my opinion was the band should have been put down, or at least a name change when Carl passed away.
Yeah, I that's not the first time I've heard that. Yeah, I mean, it's just a shame. You know, if the 5 of us would have stayed together and been the tight-knit group that we were for that run, you know, we could have put out who knows what we could have done. But, you know, Jeff and Mark torpedoed that. And, you know, what's weird is that Mark and Jeff fired me from the band, and Mark, obviously, if he was going to leave a year later, he must have already been having thoughts about exiting the band. So if he's already starting having doubts about staying in the band, why does he want to get rid of me if he's already got a foot out the door? I mean, it's just stupid. There's a lot of stupid shit that went on.
Right. Well, on a cheerier note, we wanted to shift things to your current outfit, which we've listened to a lot, and Mark had some questions about your current band that he wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah, definitely. Now I know, you know, obviously you're the bass player from Vicious Rumors. Everybody knows that, but I guess it was around 2005 or so you kind of started playing guitar.
Yeah, I got clean and sober in 2005, and part of my rehab was I just delved really deeply into the guitar. Hours and hours and hours every day, and I got really good really fast, and kind of it's very strange, or not strange, but it's very uncommon or maybe unheard of for somebody at age 44 to be shifting gears like that. And that's how old I was at the time. But I wanted to, London and my wife had been married for about 4 or 5 years by then, and we talked about doing some stuff together. Her being wanting to sing, and the first thing we did was we worked on I played bass on the Chastain In and Outrage album that came out, and I don't know when that was. She engineered the bass tracks for me, so that was the first time that we worked together. But we started working on stuff after that, writing songs, and it was about that time that I went back to VR to do the Warball CD, but I just wasn't into it. There was no Carl, and Mark wasn't there, and I just said, screw this. I want to do my own thing. I don't want to go back to the past, so I quit VR. Just started working on the band that would become WildeStarr, which was my wife and I. And by the time we entered the studio to record the first album in 2008, which was the Arrival CD, I'd only been playing guitar for a couple of years, but if you listen to that record, it doesn't sound like it. It's almost like some kind of supernatural or divine intervention that saved my life from my substance abuse problems and enabled me to get really good really fast on the guitar. And I said to myself, and I told London, I said, if we do something, I want to do it. I want to do something that's as good as VR or better, if not better. Or what's the point in doing it? Because everybody's going to compare what I'm doing now to what I did in the past.
Sure.
So I don't want people to be saying like, well, his glory days were in VR and that was the best. But I'll put anything that London and I have done in WildeStarr up against anything that I've done in VR. And I think it's at the very least on the same level.
Yeah. Well, now you said that you had songs that you had submitted to VR that, were never used. So you said before that you kind of did use some of this material for WildeStarr, right?
Yeah, I played guitar a little bit back then, but never. I mean, it was enough to bang out chords and show Jeff and Mark my ideas, but never to the level that I was able to play at with WildeStarr. So it's amazing how the whole thing came together. And London had just been this hidden gem who just never really got the opportunity in bands and the exposure that she really was deserving of, until we decided to start doing stuff together. And I didn't really know how great of a singer she was.
Yeah. So she had never sang in any bands prior?
Not that anybody had really ever heard. And then I'm like, my God, this sounds like a female Rob Halford. This is fucking insane. Arrival came out in 2009. And we basically just kept it a studio project. We originally were going to put a full band together and tour and stuff, but we had a hard time finding people to play with us. And I told London, I said, you know what, let's just keep this a studio thing. And I ended up playing all the guitars and bass on all the albums that we've done. We've done 3 now. We did Arrival, Telltale Heart came out in 2012. And then 2017, we did,
Beyond the Rain.
And I've played all the guitars and bass myself on all 3 of the albums. The only thing London and I didn't do was we had a guy named Josh Foster who's back in California. We're out in Texas now. We've been out in the Houston area for 7.5 years, but Josh has done the drums for us. And so we just kept it a studio project. We got a little boost. We hooked up with Chip Ruggieri, who's a publicist for Judas Priest. A friend of a friend gave the Arrival CD to him, and he fell in love with it. And we ended up hooking up with him, so he helped us out with a lot of promo stuff. So it's kind of been an uphill climb getting recognition because we don't tour, and it's really tough to get exposure when you don't tour. But we both kind of like the domestic life, and we started several businesses out here in Texas. We started investing in real estate in the stock market, and I started a company called Star Guitar Systems 4 years ago, where I build upgrade electronics for guitar and bass, and that thing has just taken off like a rocket. So we've got all these business interests here that really keep us anchored. So it would be really tough for us to tour, but I don't really regret it because I'm just happy working in the studio making music. And I think we've made some really phenomenal tunes. I always look back on the stuff I did with VR until the very end. I always look at it with very fond memories. And I got to tour the world 2 or 3 times. It was really cool, a lot of fun. We made some great music, but I'm at this second half of my life, doing the stuff with London has been the favorite of all the music I've made in my career. This is the best stuff that I've ever done, in my opinion.
That's really cool. So is there, you said 2017 was the Beyond the Rain album. Is there anything that you've been working on since then?
Yeah, we've had a couple of major stumbling things. We had a really bad house fire 2 years ago, and our recording studio was destroyed.
Oh, wow.
Here in the house, among other things. So we had to move into a rental house that the insurance company paid for, and that threw everything. And all of our tracks were destroyed that we're working on the new album. And it took a year and a half for the house, to the insurance, everything to get figured out, and for the contractors to, they basically knocked the house back down to the skeleton. the support beams and stuff, and basically rebuilt about 80% of the house.
Oh, wow.
So we finally moved back into the house a couple of months ago, and we're rebuilding the studio right now. And I'm kind of embarrassed that it's been 5 years since the last record came out. I've got 2 albums worth of material that I've written, and I sit every night on the couch out here writing material, but we're in the process of putting the studio back together right now. I'd like to have a 4th album out by the end of the year is my goal.
Okay.
And this dovetails into something else which you may or may not know about. But I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease last year.
Oh, no, not aware of that.
Yeah, so I'm dealing with the same thing that Glenn Tipton is battling. Yeah. So my time is running out in terms of how long I'm going to be able to keep playing. So it really means a lot to me to be able to get this final WildeStarr album out. And then I'm not going to say I'm going to retire. I'll keep playing as long as I can. I just don't think I can go through another album it's going to take a lot for me to be able to get through this final album, and I just don't think I'll probably be able to do it again. What I'd like to be able to do is keep writing music, and maybe release singles with London, and I may not be able to play everything. I'm smart enough to know that if I can't do it, I'll bring somebody else in. So I want to try to get through this last WildeStarr album, be our 4th and final one, and then maybe do some stuff where we collaborate with other people. Maybe I'll just play bass. Maybe I'll just play rhythm guitar. I talked to Vinnie Moore about maybe helping me out. I talked to David Chastain about maybe helping me out, where it would be more of a collaboration of people, and I'll just do what I can as long as I can keep doing it. But yeah, it's not a good situation, but I'm okay. I'm staying positive.
You sound great.
Yeah.
Well, the alternative is despair, and I've got a lot of positive things going on in my life right now. This is obviously a life-changing thing that I'm going through, and I don't know how much time I have left because Parkinson's is all over the map. I basically, I'll tell you the same thing I could tell everybody else. I could be dead in 3 years, or it could linger on for the rest of my life for like 15, 20, 25 years. I just take every day as it comes, and I'm just thankful that every day that I'm get up and wake up with a smile on my face, because that's really the only way to live. And I know Glenn Tipton's probably, even though his career has been devastated by this disease, I know enough about Glenn to know that he's got his chin up and he's staying positive. But there's no guarantees in life, and none of us get out of here alive. And this is the burden that I have to bear.
Yeah, there are no guarantees in life. That's for sure.
Very true.
I hear you, brother.
But I'm okay. I'm okay with it. Now I'm in stage 1, so it's not so terribly bad. As we speak right now, my right hand and my right arm are shaking badly, probably because I'm a little nervous talking about this, because I haven't talked a lot about it. But I just hope that I can stay positive if the deterioration continues and it gets into stage 2, stage 3, and it's pretty ugly if you look it up online.
Yeah.
So, but I'm staying positive. I'm cool. I'm okay. I've had a great life, and I have a great life. I have a great wife. I've got a great daughter. I've done a lot of things I've dreamed about, and I'm going to keep doing them as long as I can and stay positive. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah,
I hear you, bro. I've had quite a few curveballs thrown at me in my life too, and you have to, and like yourself, I think it applied to me too. It always seems to get me back into a good mood and in good places. Music. It's always been the one consistent thing that will get me out of a bad time in my life.
Yeah. You just never know how life's going to turn out. I mean, look at, I'm 60 now. I'm going to be 61 next month, and it's easy to bitch and complain and whine about things like this when they go wrong. But what just crossed my mind as we were talking about this, I go, look at how many years I've been alive and everything I've done since Carl Albert died tragically in that car accident. Almost 27 years now. or actually 20. Yeah, it'll be 27 years this April, I think. And he was cut short at what, 31, 32?
32 years old. Yep.
Yeah. So it's just important to take each day as a blessing.
And you know what the reality of it is, Dave? We live in this time now where people like to say, oh, you're only 60. I just turned 63, so I'm like 2 years older than you. People say to me, oh, you know, you're young. And you know, in reality, we're not. Like, if you look at like our grandfathers at 60, you were in your 60s, you were an old man. I mean, you pretty much were on your last days. So I look at it like, due to modern medicine and you know, better taking care of yourself, we're kind of on borrowed time, because just 2 generations ago, if you were in your 60s, you know, there aren't that many people that lived into their 70s in the early 20s and 30s.
You're right. And it probably wasn't, I don't know that, I'm not sure about the history of the treatment of Parkinson's, but it probably wasn't that long ago that Parkinson's was a death sentence.
That's right. And it no longer
and
is.
Now they've got medication, and they've even got a brain implant operation that they can do now in extreme cases. But you look at AIDS. I mean, AIDS was at one time was a death sentence, and it no longer is.
It no longer is at all.
Right.
Yeah. So it's amazing what medicine can do. But yeah, there are times when when I think, I do the math and I go, good God, 20 years ago I was 41. 20 years from now, I'm going to be 81. That's just scary.
Right. No, I know. Believe me, I'm 2 years older than you. You're not. I'm 2 years more scared than you are.
But life is a journey. I've had a lot of ups and downs. I've had a lot of good things and bad things happen, but I think more good things than bad things. And this whole situation with the Parkinson's diagnosis is not going to. If I always tell people it's a battle, like it's a war I can't win, but I'm going to keep fighting till my last breath. So
exactly,
I just try to stay as positive as I can. And
hey, man, you lived a life that we all envy. You were a rock star in a great band in a great era. You saw the world. You made videos. You made records for major albums. Everybody, whether you're a fan or an aspiring musician, wishes that they had that resume. And now you have a good woman, and you're in a good place. So there's plenty of positive things in your life.
Yeah, there's the old saying, no matter how bad things are, there's always somebody who's got things worse.
There's no question about it. Yeah. No question about it.
So there's no sniveling from my end. I'm full speed ahead, onward and upward, and just going to try to get this last record done and then assess the situation and take it from there.
Cool. We'll be looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I mean, Tom and I, we really appreciate this talk today. We appreciate you opening up and, talking about Vicious Rumors and, of course, about WildeStarr and your life situation. Just, appreciate you opening up about that. And best of luck to you. That's for sure. Hey,
I appreciate you guys calling me and enjoyed the conversation.
This was a great interview. I mean, we've done a whole bunch of interviews. I got to honestly say this was aside from your band, was one of my favorite bands, but it was a great interview, and I really want to thank you for your time, and we'll keep in touch. I don't know if you remember, I used to bother you on Instant Message a couple of years ago about Vicious Rumors all the time. And,
I think I remember.
Yeah, I'm sure. So we will keep in touch, and it's great talking to you, Dave.
Guys.
Excellent. Be well, Dave.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.